Okay. So welcome everybody. My name is Anita Thompson of Art Venture Workshops, and tonight's program is sponsored by Feasterville Library. Thank you very much. And I believe last week was Library Week. So thank you to all the librarians for all you do, and also for sponsoring these programs, allowing me to teach to all of you wonderful people. And thank you, everyone, for continuing to show up. So we are going to be creating a mini masterpiece tonight, our sunset bird silhouette painting. We're first going to need a pencil to draw our silhouette. I'm going to fix my camera here. I realize I don't have everything in view, so I'm going to fix that. You can see our basic colors, red, yellow, white, black. I lost the Parkers. Here we are. And you want to make sure you have a cup of water, two brushes, a flat brush and a round brush. Basically, our flat brush is for the background, and our round brush is more for any details that we create. If you have other colors, you are welcome to add other colors. I mentioned like blue and purple. You could add those in your sunset if you want. You can add pink, but our basic colors are red, yellow, which we'll make orange with, and white and black. All right, so, oh, we got two more people coming in. Okay. All right, so we're going to start drawing our silhouette here. So you're going to need your pencil. I'm just going to move this on over. So, whoa. So we're going to draw our bird first. And then obviously, or I'm sorry, first we're going to draw our branch. Now, you are welcome to do something extra with your branch. That something extra might be that maybe you draw the silhouette of a flower, or maybe you add more branches. You can absolutely go to town with this in any way you want, but I'm going to be showing you what I'm doing with it. I'm just backing up here so I can get the whole screen in. All right, so here we are. We're going to create our first area down here at the bottom left of our canvas. And I just have to swivel one more time here. There we go. Okay. So we're going to draw this area here. So it's a little bit bulbous, but we're going to start like this. And then we're going to start up with our first kind of branch. Now, as you can see, it's kind of bumpy. I'm going to just shine a light on it a little more so you can see that. Also, I want to make sure everyone's on speaker view. That way you have an up close view. All right, so we're going to continue going over here. And I'm probably going to add more as I paint it, but you can see it's kind of bumpy. And then we're going to go for the longer branch right here. And so it's going to kind of curve a little bit. Let me move it a little more in focus. And it's going to be a little bit pointy. I kind of picture this as like a dried up branch with maybe some sort of thistle on it. I don't know. I just kind of made it up and thought it looked really neat, as I do with a lot of my things. But I should probably do more research so that it actually looks like something else. And our next step is finally going to be our bird. And so first, I'd like to draw the legs here. So we're going to make sure the legs are standing on top of our branch. And what I've done is just using those sort of stick figure legs here. Let me go a little closer in case you can't see. Let's get a bit more of a screenshot in here and put this over there. All right. And then we're going to draw the silhouette of our bird. So we're going to start at the bottom. Make him a little roundish. He's puffing out his chest just a little bit. There's his beak. Now, the other thing too is if you have an idea of a certain bird that you want to draw, you could do that too. And then because he's kind of disappearing a little bit from behind the branch, we're going to make sure that his tail is kind of sticking out here. I'm going to probably make this a little bit longer. Like so. And I'm also going to move his one leg a little bit. And I might make him a little bit thicker. And then the last thing we need is our morning sun. Or evening sun, whichever you prefer. Sunset, sunrise, whichever you prefer. Just kind of fixing his beak a little bit, make it a little thinner. Okay. And that's pretty much it for our bird. Now, the other thing is, if you want to add something else, you could add like a butterfly, the silhouette of a butterfly. You could add some grass coming up from the bottom. What else could you add? You could add the silhouette of a dragonfly. So just giving you some ideas in case you want to add something to your painting. I'm just kind of reconfiguring his body a little bit. I want to move his legs over. And the first part that we're going to start painting is going to be our background. There we go. One more leg here. Okay. So this is where we are now ready to start our painting. And I actually did this starting from the bottom and went upward because I went from dark to light. This will challenge your ability to create some blending, which happens when the paint is semi-wet. So what you're going to do is you're going to start off at the bottom. And the other thing is, if you want to add a little bit of black to your red, you can do that too. Black and red will make it a darker red, almost like a burgundy or like a brick red. You can then start to add red. As you can see, this is a gradient that's happening here. So I think I actually did add a little bit of black to this red. Now that I'm looking at it, I do remember doing that. So just a little bit. Then I added red. And then I added red and yellow to make orange, but I added more red so that it was a reddish orange. Then I added reddish orange and added a little more yellow. So we're creating a gradient. So it's all these sort of very slight layers of the red, orange, and yellow. And then obviously as we get up here, we've got some orange happening around the sun. And then as it gets toward the sun, it gets brighter with yellow. And that's really when we start to add our white. So we do our background first, and then our final is going to be the black silhouette with adding some yellow on top of the bird where it's sort of highlighted around the sun, and a little bit on the body. So we'll talk about that when we get to it, but let's start off with our background. So, oh, Parker's coming on in. Hey, Parkers. Okay. So you can see here, I've got the 4 colors. So we're going to start first with our red and black, and basically how this is going to work. Oh, and also if you need a smaller flat brush, you are welcome to do that too. I know this one. Oh, I saw Ruby. I'm so glad you were able to join. Yay. So you can get a smaller flat brush if you want. This one is pretty big. I think this is a number 5. They're also different according to what brand you use, but this one, I don't even know what the brand is actually. But anyway, so the way this is going to look, I'm going to put my red out like so. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of black. I know that's a little dark. So I'm going to go back in and add some more red. That's pretty burgundy. So didn't want that. Oh, we're getting a little closer here. Little closer to the red that I want. It's ever so slightly dark. All right. So what I did was I started adding more red. I added a little bit too much black. But now I've got the brick red that I want, adding just a little more to get it a little lighter. Okay. I'm going to move this up here. And I'm going to start here at the bottom. So I'm going to move this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sweep this in the bottom right corner here of the painting. And I'm going to go up a bit as well, going towards the branch. Now that's a little dark. And so I want to make sure that it's pretty wet so that as I continue here, basically, I'm going to start being able to make that gradient. And I think I'm going to get a smaller brush. I want to let this dry just a little bit. Until we start, or so that we can then start our next color. Just grabbing a smaller brush here for blending purposes. So after you apply that first color, you want to let that sit just a little bit, because then we're going to start to add the red to it. And that way you'll be able to get your gradient a bit more smoothly. I'm just drying off my bigger brush here. So I'm going to start to introduce my regular red. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go along the edge of that color, and you can already see that it's starting to lighten. And I'm going to start adding the red. This is just the regular red underneath the branch. Meanwhile, I keep kind of smoothing it towards the darker red. And if you look closely, there's a slight gradient that's going to happen. Now, the paint is still a little wet, so I want to make sure that it's going to start to dry a bit before I keep adding more red on top of the dark red. But for now, I'm going to take that red and I'm going to start to go more towards the branch. Just taking my time, going ever so slightly here, because that red is also going to start to be part of the next gradient. As I mentioned, we're going to be mixing red and yellow to make orange. Hi, Barry. Welcome. So while we're waiting for that color to start to dry a bit, we're adding some red going upwards into our sky, ever so slightly. We're also going to be starting to add a mixture of red and yellow in order to create orange. Now, if you have orange at home and you don't want to mix it, you can do that for sure. So I'm starting to bring my red up just a little bit on the right side. And the only reason I'm doing that is so that we have a little bit of a base color as we continue our gradient. I'm also going to add just a little bit on the left side where the branches are kind of coming to a V. I'm just adding kind of a light, sort of a light application. This is with the red. And then we're going to be able to have our gradient to mix into it. So it all looks messy right now, but I promise it will look a lot better. And when you are ready, you can start to, oops. Oh, okay. You can start to add some red on a spot on your palette. I'm using a paper plate. And then you're going to mix just a little bit of yellow so that you get orange. So obviously, the more orange or the more yellow that you add, you're going to get a lighter orange. For now, we want a reddish orange. So depending on which paint you're using, everybody's might look a little different. But here is the reddish orange. It's still dark, which is kind of what I want here. So I'm going to start adding that gradient on top of the red that I put here on the left side. And I'm going to start to continue doing it towards the bird. This is also where you might want to switch to your smaller brush. with these colors. I'm going to start doing it over here too, on the right. Again, this is red mixed with a little bit of yellow. And then I'm going to start to bring it down into the right side. I'm testing to see, yep, my paint is starting to dry, but it's still wet. And so because of that, I'm able to mix my paint. You can kind of see that a gradient is starting to happen here. Basically, what you're doing is you're taking the wet paint on your brush and you're sliding it into the color that you already put down. And it's sitting on top, but it's also mixing in just a little bit. And that's helping mix it. So now I'm going to add some more red. So again, you should be starting to see more of a gradient. I'm adding this red on top and kind of going into the darker red at the bottom. I also want to make it a little more of a brighter red, so I'm going to add a little more red to it so that it's not as brick red. I still call it brick red. I don't think people use that term these days, but I still call it brick red. It's kind of a brick red. So see that? Our gradient is starting to happen. I'm going to add a little bit over here on the left side. In between the branches here. I'm also going to break out my smaller brush so I can start to really get close to the branches. Add a little bit of red. So we're working our way up, but we're still working on the bottom here. And if you like, you can also start to add a bit of yellow right on top and kind of fan it into it. I'm using my smaller brush here. Kind of doing a combination of a smaller brush and the bigger brush as I'm laying paint on. And then you can see I'm swiping quickly back and forth, bringing up some of the dark red along the edges of these branches as it goes towards the bird's feet. And when I, in between the branch and the bird's body and feet, I started to add more orangey yellow. So for now, I'm just going to put down red. And then I'm going to start to add in the mixture of red and yellow. So just being really careful between the two legs. And just kind of looking around to see where I can still add some of that red. So right here, I want to make it a little bit more red rather than the brick red. So I'm just laying that color in with the small brush. And then I'm actually going to rinse because I want to now start to create a bit of a lighter orange. So I'm going to turn my plate around so you can see. Oops, dropping my paints here, so I'm going to move those. All right, so here's my yellow. I'm going to go right up against my previous red, so that basically I'm going to make sure that I start to make a gradient and that I can see that gradient on my plate. So this next color is still an orange, so mixing red and yellow, but there's a little more yellow now. And then we're going to start to move upward and also continuing to still kind of go into the red in order to make that gradient. So my red that I originally put down is starting to dry, and that's exactly when you want to go back in and start to add that other color and very lightly sweeping back and forth. So see, I'm going to show you. So this is, you can see my color, or how much paint I have on here, is just a little bit, just enough that I can keep kind of sweeping it. I'm going to add a little more yellow to this orange. Not happy yet with the color. All right, that's better. All right, so I'm sweeping some of that orange on top of the darkish red and even the red here, so that I'm kind of pulling all of these colors together to continue with the gradient. I keep moving my brush back and forth, as you can see, as the paint is drying, so that it's actually mixing. When I go in between the bird and the branch here, I'm going to switch to my smaller brush. And I'm going to start lightly painting in some yellow streaks. So it's going to get sunnier as we go upward. So here I go again, adding some more yellow. And as you can see, I'm using my smaller brush and I'm doing back and forth strokes, getting into that color, previous colors. Let me move my light so that you can see the difference here. So we're blending as we're going upward. Let me move my painting down now. So you can see that there's the gradient starting to happen. So this is where you want to decide, do I want more yellow? You know, do I want it to be a little more yellowy orange? And we're going to start to move upward to make it more yellowy orange anyway, as we're moving up towards the top of our bird. You can also at this point, as I mentioned, adding in some streaks of yellow going towards the bottom. Now you don't want to go towards the bottom because we've created a dark red. But what you can do is add streaks of yellow to this. And it looks kind of nice. So I'm kind of doing that right now. Adding streaks here and there. But I'm leaving the bottom color that brick red. The other thing I might want to do is start to add a little more of red now that we have a nice gradient happening. So I'm just taking some of this color, the yellow, and just blending it. So everything is getting a little more orangey as we get higher. And so now we're really going to start getting into the orangey yellow. So I have too much red on my brush at this point on both. So now I'm going to rinse both of those. It's kind of a pretty color, the water. It's like cranberry juice.
Oh, vodka would be better.
Little vodka and cranberry.
Yeah.
Hey, I see people all the time online. I see them with the wine glasses. Feel free. Paint and sip. It's all good. Paint and sip from home. I can't because I'm teaching, and you'd probably end up not with a bird or a lopsided bird. I don't know. Okay, so still didn't get the paint out of that brush. You know. Okay, so I'm rinsing off my brush again because now I'm going to really start getting into the yellow here. So we have our gradient colors happening. I'm going to mix yellow now along the edge of that orange and make another yellowy orange. So this is how this goes. We continue to add this, and then we actually start to add some white. Okay, so yep, look at that color, nice and sunny. We're going to start to add that as we go upward, and then we'll really start to add yellow. All right. So here we are. We're getting closer to orange and not yellowy orange. Little by little, we're getting lighter. This is just step by step. This is how you create a gradient. It's not hard, but it can be, because if you rush it, it doesn't exactly come out the way you want. So I'm now just adding yellow to the orange as it's going upward, remembering to go around it the sun. And then continuing to pull some of that reddish yellow, which is the orange, just on the edge of where your other color had started, meaning the last color that you created, which was the more orangey. You still want to blend that a little bit, and then continue to move upward in the sky, remembering to start to, your brush is going to start to dry out with the colors, and that's okay. If you see what I'm doing here, I'm swiping my brush almost like I'm wiping it with the remainder of that color. And then I'm going to add pure yellow Oops, that wasn't so pure. I accidentally grabbed my red there. So I'm gonna rinse out my brush. Try again. There we go. So basically, by the time you get towards your sun, you want to start having it be mostly yellow, but you are also going to start adding white in as well. But again, doing swiping, you're also going to wait for the other parts to dry a little so that you can start to then blend that yellow back down where it meets your orange so that again, you get a proper gradient. So here I am swiping back and forth at the top of the canvas using yellow. And then as it's drying, this is where you can look and see if you need to add more colors across. And so with this, it's not exactly left to right across as far as the gradient goes, but if you want, you can make it. So I'm now pushing my color because everything is still wet. And sometimes you might want to add a little yellow around. I like to kind of add a little bit of yellow at the back of the bird, not on the bird, but still in the background here on the right. Almost like the sun is kind of highlighting him a little bit. And then I want to add a little bit of yellow on the left where the branch is. So see, I'm going back and forth. With these colors. Also taking or switching my brush to the side and swiping some more colors down into that dark red because I now want to create a little bit lighter of some colors. So I'm also going to go back into my red now. And so while my dark red has pretty much dried, I'm now swiping in some more red at the bottom into that dark red so that again, I have a little more of a gradient. And I'm using the side of my brush. I'm standing my brush up like this. And I'm using it like this in order to swipe that color back and forth. And this is where you can start to add chunks of the different colors. So again, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to swipe and add some red on top of that orange. And again, because my paint is still kind of wet, it's easy to do with a light hand and you're going to get that gradient. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow here. So it's a play between going back and forth between your colors. I'm going to add a little more red here. And going in each section, like I want to add a little more red over here on the left side. But I want the dark red to be down here. So I'm just going to swipe a little bit. So that some of that shines through. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow. So this painting is all about the background. All about getting beautiful sunset here. And you can start to bring, as you're going upward here, you can start to kind of bring some of that orange up towards the top. And you can do that by going very light and also starting to make sort of a sunburst effect all around the bird. This is still with your sort of orangey. Gotta add a little more red over here. So continuing to move that color upward. I like to have a little bit of orange on the left top corner here. So kind of like in the triangular part up here, I'm just mixing some yellow, kind of blending it. Whoops. Just had a little bit more red come out, so I'm gonna rinse my brush. And you want to make sure that around the body of the bird, you want to make sure to start getting your paint around there. So, and also being very vigilant about around your sun, where you're going to then start applying yellow and then yellow white. But first, make sure that you have around your bird here at the bottom very well, so that you don't run out of color and have to go back and kind of apply. I'm going to add a little bit of red here. And you can start to make your gradient a little more even by taking your brush slightly dry and going back and forth across all of it. I've got a little bit of orangey red on here. And then I'm going to start applying more yellow so that it's sunny as it moves upward. I'm just going back and forth. Oops, I had a little too much paint there, so we have to wait for that to dry. But starting to bring some of that yellow now into the drying colors and making sort of a sunburst with it. Now at this point, if you're at this point, the red should be already applied to your gradient, so that now your yellow that you're adding is sitting on top, but also the red is still kind of shining through. And again, I keep twisting my brush on the side as I'm applying color, and then I pull that color outward into the rest of the painting here. I'm moving back and forth. I'm gonna now start to add just a little bit of yellow here, emanating kind of from the bird. The sun behind him. So again, my red is drying. And so now, once you start to have like the orangey yellows happening, you can then start to mix yellow with your white. So I'm going to rinse my brush here. And again, this might be a back and forth for you, and that's okay. But here's my yellow. So I'm going to put my yellow on my palette. I'm going to mix just a little bit of white, and we're going to do the same thing. We want to kind of lighten up this white by adding some white. And we're going to be adding this to the top so that it's more of a whitish yellow. And then to make it sunny, we're going to start going kind of in sunbursts towards the sun, adding this color lightly into the bottom area of the bird, the sunset. And then in between those sunset areas, we're also going to go back in and add a little bit of orange. So again, I'm going to go right across the top, left to right, with that yellowish white. And it's not real bright yet. We're going to get brighter with that too. So we're kind of doing a gradient even with the yellow. This takes a little bit of patience, but it comes out really nice. So I'm going across the top, left to right. And again, this color is the combination of yellow and white. It's still very yellow because we want to make sure to have a base yellow color so that when we add white in a little bit, it'll have something to be mixing into. And the white should be the lightest color so that it looks like the sun is really shining. So again, you want to make sure that your paint is kind of starting to dry so that when you start to add some of that yellowy white, it's on your brush, but it's starting to create an effect of a sunburst. So again, going back into my light yellow. You can also decide where you want some of this bright, lightish yellow. Like, I think I'm going to come again behind the bird, kind of underneath here. Add a little bit on the left side. Just really light swipes. We're still going to add some on top of the bird too after we apply our black. And remember, if also water can also help mix in with your paint. So if you're finding that things are drying too fast, you can add a little bit of water to your paint on the canvas. You can also do it pre-mixed, and just a little bit of water. You don't want to water it down too much because then it's more like watercolor. That would be a neat effect, but. And so now I'm going to lighten up my yellow by adding more white. So now we're getting really more of a light lemon yellow. So as you can see on the left here, let me move my painting down because I realize you can't see my yellow gradient. So here's yellow mixed with white. And then this is a lot of white mixed with yellow. And I'm going to apply that to the top so that it's getting sunnier. Oh, let me add a little more white to this. I want some more white. And now I'm going to start to go around the sun. Again, this is the yellowy white. And then your sun is going to be mostly white. It can be a slight combination of yellowy white, but definitely lighter than what we're doing here. You can also start to bring this lightness out. Again, kind of swiping into the rest of your gradient here. Using the side of your brush, you know, upward like this, not making it flat against your painting. And you're making kind of little sunbursts here. Add some more over here. You can also switch to your smaller brush. It's easier. Yeah, just a little bit of water here, or I'm sorry, a little bit of white. Get a little brighter. And you can add even a little bit more of some yellow if you want. I'm going to do that to this one, to this part. I want it to be a little sunnier. You can also add some kind of stripes of yellow like so to make it, again, sunbursty. And in between, you'll add more white. So see, we're getting there with the top part of the sky, or at least you should be. And then again, because the rest is dry, the background, you can kind of swipe with that yellowy white color, start to bring out some of the sunbursts. Like so. And this is where you want to see where you have some uneven parts. I'm going to go back and just add a little more orange to some parts here. So that's why you also keep your orange still mixed. Might add a little bit of yellow in between. And still, I might add a little bit of red. I like to add some red kind of to the edge of my painting here on the left side and a little bit on the right, but mostly here along the left side, just to give it a little more depth here. I'm going back down into towards the bottom here. Move this up a little bit. Yep, looking like a good gradient. Adding the finishing touches here till I go into the sun. Using that very white yellow. But I just want to make sure the rest of it is good. Adding a little more orangey to the top left corner. And this is all, you can decide how yellowy or orangey you want sections of it. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out my starburst here, or sunburst really, and evening it out a little bit. Adding just a little bit of yellow down below. Okay, and now I'm finally ready for the white sun. So now I'm going to mix my white again with the yellow so that there's still a bit of yellow in it. And now I'm going to start to go in for the sun. So you can do a combination of first kind of creating it with your bigger brush, but then you might want to switch to your smaller detail brush as it goes around and gets toward the edge. So I like to do kind of a combination of both. I have one brush in my other hand, and my really small one here, so that I can start to make the sun a little more round without it getting too much bigger, which happens. Right? Especially as we're trying to make something round. Starting to add more white into it on the right side here. And now really starting to make the sun much more of a circle. Making that circle a little more sun-like. And I want to blur sort of the edges around the sun with a little bit of the yellow. But first, I want to make sure that it's painted nice and bright. And then once the paint is on there, I'm going to take my bigger brush and I'm going to very lightly go around the sun along the edge and just blur it out a little bit I have a little bit of whitish yellow on my brush, and I'm just kind of softening around it, going in circles and creating kind of circles as I'm going around the sun here. So I'm doing that using, again, the side of my brush here. And I'm very lightly moving some of that color that's a little bit dry on my brush. I'm also going to start dipping into my white using the side of my brush so that I can create some more starbursts coming from the sun. And if you have to go back in and add some yellow in between, that might be a good idea to kind of soften it. So again, this is a combination of yellow and white on top of the white that we put down for the part right around the sun and on top of the sun. And now I'm just going back and doing a combination of some yellow, a little more yellow before I start in on the actual bird. Want to make sure the background is the way you like it before we finish off with our silhouette. I'm going to add a little more orange over here. There we go. There's a little too much sun happening here on the right side for my taste. A little too much sun. Oops. Add a little more red. And when you're ready, you can start with your black silhouette, which is where we are headed next for our final part of this painting. As you can tell, this is a shorter painting. You know, usually our paintings are about 2 hours. This one is a little shorter, but I think still, ironically enough, pretty detailed for a small painting. Let's see. Just looking to see anywhere else. I'm gonna add a little bit of white here. Oops. So ironically enough, the branch is kind of fun to do as well. I'm just adding another. What I do is I end up letting the sun dry a little more, and then I can apply some more white paint to make it a little brighter. So I'm just doing that now before I start to apply the black. Oh, I think I accidentally painted over his nose. At least I didn't apply the black yet. All right. Happy with the sunset. Now we move on to the black. So I like to start off with the bird and then work downward into the rest of it. And I use a combination of both brushes. I start to add on the bigger parts, the thicker parts with my bigger brush. So the bird here. And again, turning my brush to the side, especially, and going slow. Lightly filling it in. And just adding a little bit of paint at a time. And starting to kind of fill in the body. So the back of his tail here starts to go past or behind the branch. So again, I'm going on the thicker parts. And then I'm going to go back and add some more just subtle bumps, especially along the edge where it gets pointy. I don't really want to use this brush to do that. So I'm just kind of filling in the bigger areas first. I really like silhouette paintings. I'm going to add at least another one for the summer. So I don't know if you know, but libraries tend to go by the summer reading program, and they have themes every year. And this theme for this year is travel. So kind of like traveling with your library. Anything that has to do with travel. So that is a really fun one. A lot of interesting program ideas to do. Okay, so I'm now going to start to go in with my smaller brush to make some of these kind of bumps, these bumpy details. And our last final part will be, we're going to add a little bit of yellow to this black in sections so that it's a little bit lighter. And it looks like the yellow from the sun is actually a bit highlighting. So this part takes patience and a thin brush. And just take your time. And work upwards. You can add branches as you go if you want. Again, it doesn't have to look exactly like mine. You can add some more smaller branches here. I'm gonna start to add his little feet. Oh, and his legs. Black makes all the difference. Makes the other colors pop really nice. Okay. Get him a little thicker here, a little rounder. And finally his beak.
Hi, my love.
And then you can also add some more feathers, some outlines of feathers if you want. Here's one right under here. Give it a little flatter down here. And I'm going to make his tail just a little bit longer on this one. And I just have to adjust his head a little bit. There we go. Make it a little thicker. Okay, and then you're going to add some black. Or I'm sorry, some yellow to your black. You're going to kind of get a little bit of a green. And you're going to use that as a bit of a highlight on the black. So I like to do it just a little bit around his body on the bottom. And you can add some like in his actual body on top of the black. Add a little more, sort of like an olive green. I also like to add some on the top part where his head is, facing the sun. Basically, all of this is kind of facing outwardly. The sun part, just re-rinsing a little bit. I got a little too much black happening, so I'm gonna mix a little more. You can even add a little bit of orange to him too. And then you want to do the same on the top part of the branch so that it looks like there's some highlighting happening from the sun. Kind of dot it along in sections on top of your black. Now, if your black is still too wet, obviously you want to wait a bit. I'm going to add up just a little bit here. Add a little bit more black here. And just a little bit more where his little legs are. Okay. I'm wondering how we're all doing. And let's see. Just going to add one more, little bit more red, reddish orange to this one section to make it a little more brighter. And this is where you can kind of start to decide that. Maybe if you want something a little more yellowy, now that it's dried. And just add some really light touches. This one a little more sunny up here. So adding some finishing yellow. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.